you're also Reverend. So tell us about your journey into Christianity before we go into the history.
It's a long one, but the short of it is I had an encounter with Jesus in 1997, June 21st. I had a very powerful encounter. I've got a whole testimony on it. But the long and short of it is I was a musician, and I worked very closely with some of the big pioneer names in this country. We played music, worked under them, worked with them. In fact, we pioneered the rap art form in this country. We were rapping before, who's the famous first rappers in this country?
Keith, there was Keith something, there was Crisis.
Yeah, those are far later than us. Wow. We were there like 88, 89, 90, 91.
With this guy who's now
So Alan Mvula, yeah,
yes,
Kelvin Samba. In fact, Kelvin Samba is my contemporary. We're in the same group.
Yeah, I remember Kelvin Samba. Okay.
And Alan Mvula, DJ Life.
DJ.
So these are guys that were contemporaries. Okay. So we started the gig back then.
Okay. So now we can zero. Just tell us about your music career.
So we started music in let's say our first group were these youngsters. I was in grade 9. And were these B-boys, so that's the term that would be used. B-boy is a beat boy, which is a hip-hop terminology for what really those early day hip-hoppers were. Break dancers basically, and then from break dance, because hip-hop is multifaceted. You've got graffiti, you've got the DJing. Those days you were like really serious, not just this DJ where you put music, but literally mixing and cutting and scratching and transforming and all these terminologies. So that's a branch of hip-hop. Then you also have the graffiti, and then you have the breakdancing, and of course rhythm and poetry. So rhythm and poetry or rap, that's where it all started from. So we were B-boys in the 1988 time. We would listen to people like Kumo D and Run DMC and that whole crew. So we started doing rap, and I remember our first stint, truth or not, we ran into, we walked actually as a group. We walked to Central Studios. There was a studio called Central Studios back in the day. These are the days that Patrick Chisombila was our local Michael Jackson. So we went to Central Studios. They had a very revolutionary setup in those days. 2 Musungu guys got together. One guy called Dick Curtis, who actually used to be a DJ, a presenter. On those days, we used to call it, well, they're the ones who gave birth to Radio 4, if you think about it. So it was first called Mulungushi Radio, or Big M, Big Mulungushi, then became Radio 4. Now, that era, this is the first DJ, Sarah Mubanga, Marian Chigwedere, Mike Tabor. We used to jokingly call him Mike the Bull on Radio 4, But that group, those were the first DJs. So you had a Muzungu guy called Dirty Dick. And Dirty Dick used to present with Sarah Mubanga. So very interesting, mad English guy. And Dirty Dick teamed up with another Muzungu guy called Herman Stridle. Now Herman Stridle was the founder/manager of a band called the Zambezi Band. And Herman Stridle's history goes all the way back to the mid-80s or early 80s. He had come here in Zambia as a rock player with another Muzungu guy called Charlie Boskich. Charlie Boskich is the gentleman that ended up marrying Anna Mwale. So Anna Mwale is a well-known woman, no, not now, these kids don't know who she is. So Anna Mwale was the wife to Charlie Boskich, so they went back to the UK. Anna Mwale apparently used to sing with Muriel Mwamba, and they had a Kalito music group. I'm not sure if they had anything to do with Jane Osborne, but I know that Muriel Mwamba and Anna Mwale definitely had a group they sang together. So these were, they actually, interestingly, believe it or not, we used to have an art program back in 1978, 79, 80 called Art School. And art school, not art school, but art is cool, but art school. And art school was run by some Muzungu painter guy who I forgot his name. So he used to do the art thing, and the theme song for that show on Zambia Broadcasting Services was sung by Anna Mwale and Muriel Mwamba as young little undiscovered talents. So that's how far back it goes. So Charlie marries that lady, goes. Now Herman remains in Zambia and decides to do his thing here. So he forms this Zambezi band, and in those days, he's the one who ended up recruiting a good number of the Witch guys. You know, the Witch was a very famous band in Zambia from the Zamrock era. Huge band in the 70s. In the end 80s, it changed a lot. Like a lot of people just, you know, like Alex, what's his name? Alex Kunda went did his own album, took off, went that side. Then you know, Derek Mbao, Derek Moyo, sorry, I think it was Derek Moyo, because Derek Moyo is such a distinct voice, and he was mosi-au-tunya, with Menariki Longa. So he comes into the Witch. You had Masao Komwale. There was another Witch in the 80s that did some really funky beats, almost sounded like Osibisa. No, Osibisa is a 70s sound, but 80s, they sounded almost like Shalama or something. Nice stuff, which they did. And that's the time they recruited Patrick Sembele. So he did Let the Sun Shine on Me, famous song. And then many of those guys ended up in the Zambezi band. So Zambezi was run by Herman Strido. Herman Strido was manager of a place called Remo, which is now Cheetah Lodge in Kafue. So here in Lusaka, they then teamed up with Dick Curtis and formed a studio by North Mid called Central Studios. So it's that studio where these youngsters who called themselves Bass Rock Posse, that's what we called ourselves, the Bass Rock Posse, went over there, youngsters like 17, 16, 14, with our hip hop. We had these to my high tops, those days with the big thing is done. I've seen they've come back in fashion with the big what you call that thing, the flap, so, and then with hats on the side and jackets and stuff. So I see these youngsters walking around and I say, yeah, that just gives me memories. But we didn't do sagging pants those days. But we had the big baseball cap, baseball shirts and the whole look. So we go to Central Studio. We arrive there, and I still remember this. And we knock there, and we come in there, and then like, who are you guys? We're the Bass Rock Posse. And what do? We're rappers. And then there was a guy called Kenny Wild, a well-known guy from that era. I mean, if people are watching this and they know the names I'm saying, they will definitely connect. It means it's people of our age or higher. So there's a guy called, Kenny Wild. But by then, like I'm saying, Herman Strido had hired a number of Zambezi guys that were working with him. So he had the late Gideon Mulenga, sort of like producing at that studio, at Central Studios. By the way, Central Studios is the one that produced songs like Kokon by Ballad Zulu. There was that whole bunch of productions that were coming from that era. They were done at Central Studios. So Wapolina Mkandawira and some of his early works, Burning Youth, all these to my guys from that era. That's their era. That's where they did their productions from. And before that, they would do their production from ZNBC with Timmy Mvula, because Timmy Mvula had some killer setup those days. He had the best sound, light people. They would mic that stuff so well. If you watch some of those clips, people think it was playback. No, it was live in the studio. They would come in the morning, set up for 1 to 2 hours. When they are ready, then they do one shot. That was like MTV Unplugged before MTV Unplugged. No, it's just that they didn't have a studio audience. So Pongo Z, Mulemana Boys, all that stuff was live recorded at ZMBs. They just have a full set with crew up there, and they'll do the sound, they'll mic everything, and then boom, let's go. And they'll record. Bum, 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 done. The tape will be taken. Then that tape will be cut now, those segments you'd watch on Time for Music. Absolute genius when I think of it. So it was that era that he now hired when people like Gideon Mlenga used to play bass in The Witch. Derek Mbao, I'd see him there. There was a gentleman called Mitch. Mitch was a producer. He used to do tape recordings and things like that. And that's where I met these guys. So Mitch was sitting there. And then we had Kenny Wild, guitar player, but used to be a bouncer at Moon City or something. And so we walk in there and we say, we're rappers. And then Kenny Wild looks at us, to my kids, and says, rappers, Mukachula. It was so discouraging. But either way, if I had to name the people that day, there was Kelvin Sampa, there was myself, Walter Mwambazi, my brother Leslie, there was Bernard Bernard Zimba, he's now passed on. There is another friend of ours called Mutale Mulenga, and there was another friend of ours, I don't think he had come in at that time, but I could be wrong. But we had a friend called Brian Malukanga, became a teacher at Lake Road. So he was the other member. And Tom Ziwa, yeah, so 7 of us. So we were really, really obstinate about this whole rap thing. But either way, that's how it began. So it's Herman Strider who saw the talent in us and decided to give us a chance to do recording. So we'd go all the way to Kafue to record because they had a fallout with Dick Curtis, so they moved their studio from Northmead and took it to Kafue Remo. You can imagine how many Zambian musicians had to, even if you ask people like Shakarongo and all these guys, they all had to go record from there. You know, Kula Gogo, you know, all these groups from that era. That's like 1989. You know, I'm thinking right now, my brain is on brain freeze, but I remember that's how I bumped into Akim Sumukonda. He had already done Chipondo Chandi, but there were other recordings he was recording at Central Studios. Like I say, Ballad Zulu. The names really elude me right now. But there's a whole bunch of them that we met there and would be doing their recording. So at that time, when they went to Remo in Kafue, then Kaweche Kaunda, a man I hold in very high regard, went into a partnership with an American guy called Danny Sims. Now Danny Sims has his fame because he was Bob Marley's manager. Yep, so it was not some small guy. So Danny Sims was Bob Marley's manager for a number of years. If you read the book Catch a Fire, and by the way, I was a huge Bob Marley fan, so there's nothing you can tell me about Bob Marley. You know what I'm saying? Like huge, not just Bob Marley, but that whole era. So you know, Burning Spear, the only reason I didn't go to the Burning Spear thing is because, well, I'm a believer now, and what will it point? What will it say if I'm at the Burning Spear? But I'm a huge fan, you know, the roots reggae thing, massive fan. Mutabaruka, the whole crew. So anyway, Danny Sims comes in Zambia, massive project. That's the first time this country had a state-of-the-art US level type of studio. So Danny Sims first comes in to survey the land at the invitation of Kaweche Kaunda, who then the Kaundas were still ruling. So big deal. And that's how Herman calls us. Where are you guys? In those days, to call someone was a real nightmare. Well, it's not today where you have like a cell phone, you just call and people. No, those days was landline. So he calls us. I'm a fan, I'm like, what? Of course, he's German, but he's lived in Zambia for a long time. Where are you guys? No, where? You need to come to Intercontinental now. Why? Just come. Okay, well, now wait. So we get to Inters, and that's how we meet this American guy called Danny Sims. Absolutely. I don't even know what words to use to describe that man, but a great guy. Just that being American and being in the music industry was an absolute mad guy. I'm not going to take... You know, let's put it this way. Whatever they are saying about Pdiddy, it's absolutely normal in the industry. It's just, I don't know who he pissed off and who he went against. Otherwise, whatever they are saying about Pdiddy, that industry is like that. Whether it's modeling, acting, and especially music. You know, so Danny Sims was a very interesting man, that's what I can say. So we met him, and that's how he listened to us, he liked what we do, and then that's how we met Kaweche, and then Kaweche is the one who now kind of took us on, he now embraced us.